protesters, but after they were withdrawn, they've been broadened out, and now protesters are demanding that President William Ruto resign. Let's talk to Mercy Juma now. She's the BBC's reporter in Nairobi. Mercy, thanks for joining us. The police have tried to ban protests then in the capital, in the centre of the capital. Did they manage to do that?
Indeed, a very good evening from Nairobi. So yes, today, around this time yesterday, we received this release from the police saying that they had banned protests happening anywhere around the central business districts or its environs. And they said that they were doing so because these protests have been leaderless and faceless, and they don't know anyone to hold accountable if anything goes wrong. So many things have been going wrong. But just a few minutes ago, the High Court of Kenya has actually ruled that the government does not have a right to ban protests because it's a constitutional right for people to petition, to picket. So that's been banned, and now that means that people are free to go and continue protesting on the streets, and we're just waiting to see how this unfolds, because that ruling has just been made like less than 10 minutes ago.
And I understand that there was a protest planned in a park in the centre of Nairobi. I think some of the flyers that were being distributed on social media, some of those messages went viral. Has that protest started, or will that now get going, do you think, now that the court ruling has been made?
So that was the plan today. The plan today was to actually hashtag Occupy Uhuru Park. Uhuru Park is one of the public parks here, and it's right in the middle of the central business district. But that was the plan as of yesterday evening. Today there has been heavy police presence around Uhuru Park. Nobody has been allowed to go inside the park. There has also been a lot of security forces even within the central business district. So we haven't seen the crowds we've been seeing when protests have been called out. But the people who've been at the forefront of championing and rallying people to come out have actually been really protesting, saying we need to be there. But amazingly, with the police saying the protests have been banned, people haven't come out today. But now this is going to definitely change things, because the court has now allowed people to go back to the streets. So there were no protests today, but the green light is now there from the courts.
And over the past month, have you seen protests every day? Is there any indication that this might at some point come to an end, or is it going to ramp up?
So, these protests have actually been really interesting. They started from, a demand by the people to have a controversial bill, that was the Finance Bill 2024, to be withdrawn, because it was seeking to introduce new taxes on a population that is heavily, heavily taxed. That was withdrawn, but this morphed up into a huge rallying call for a change of how governance is done in Kenya, calls for President William Ruto to, resign, because the people say, and I've actually seen this, that many of the promises he made has just not been fulfilled, and ever since he came into power, people have been struggling. The cost of living has really gone up. So there are so many demands right now that it will take us some time to implement. President William Ruto sent his whole cabinet home, save for two, and he's actually in the plans right now of constituting a new cabinet. The pressure is for him to come up with a cabinet that is lean, that is more efficient. So there will definitely be more protests, more push for him to do exactly what the people want. And, and another thing is that bringing out the people who've been gotten corruption scandals out of government. So we expect more action.
Okay, Mercy Juma, thank you very much for joining us there from Nairobi. So what is it like trying to keep a business going through this chaos and disruption? We spoke to 3 business people in Kenya about the impact the protests are having on them.
Most of the businesses, especially within the CBD or outside the CBD radius of 5 kilometers, are entirely shut 2 days a week, which is Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have to take care of our employers, our welfares and lives, so we always have to inform them not to come to work, because you've got protests running up and down, you've got backlogs and orders, and it's a cost to the company, because we pay salaries. We hope that this issue gets sorted out as soon as possible, so that businesses as a whole can resume work normally.
The fact that they need to shut down the Nairobi city can be a little bit challenging, but we've learned how to plan, we've learned how to work from home, and we've learned how to cope in support of them. It's okay. I would rather they had their voices and were heard, and we manage our business around them.
So far, we've only had to close once. That was this week. If the situation is getting bad, then we close as early as possible so that our staff can get home safe. And also, because of transport, public transport is also closed down when demonstrations are getting out of hand. Most of the suppliers, most of the businesses closed down. Even if you're open, you can operate because you need raw material.
That was some business owners in Kenya. Well, listening to that is Naomi Hossain. She is a global research professor from SOAS University in London, and she's researched how the cost of living can impact on protests all around the world. Thank you very much for coming on, Naomi. We were talking about two different countries there, but the overriding issue seems to be the cost of living and jobs.
Yes, well, thank you. Is it though, or is it also the cost of living, jobs and accountability? I'm hearing a lot about political accountability in those, both from Bangladesh and from Kenya. In both cases, we heard literally that language, and we also heard a student and the journalist explaining that people are asking for the political leadership to step down because of their response to the protests. So having attacked the protesters in both cases, I think they've both lost legitimacy. But the broader context, and this is an incredibly important context, is that there is a cost of living crisis. It's been going on now for, what will we say, 2.5 years, and it's affecting people broadly all around the world to different degrees. In Bangladesh, I think the inflation has been running at about 10%, and this is in a context where, as you said, unemployment's very high. I think it's quite similar in Kenya. Something I noticed also in both countries, I've visited both countries quite recently this year. I noticed in both countries a lot of really impressive infrastructure, nice roads, shiny new bridges and so on. And I suspect that part of this protest is about people recognizing that the countries are developing in terms of infrastructure, but the jobs and the concern for young people's prospects in particular is just not there.
You've looked at a number of protests that happened in 2022, and a lot of those were driven by the soaring cost of energy, especially in Western Europe. Do these sort of protests often start with a sort of smaller thing but then escalate? As we're seeing in Bangladesh, it seems to be escalating. It started with these quotas, but people seem to be joining it because they are, as you say, mistrusting perhaps of politicians.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. Like, I think that these they seem relatively trivial, but they're not trivial, of course, to the millions of students who are looking to get into the civil service, who are sitting exams. But yes, it very much does reflect a broader concern about the politics, about the fact that people aren't really feeling that they're having their say in what's going on. There's also a big concern about corruption. I was talking to one of my students here at SOAS yesterday, and he's a Dhaka University graduate, really brilliant young chap, and he said to me he'd already taken the civil service exam 3 times, and only then, after he'd taken that exam, it's a very competitive exam, they realised that actually they thought these exams were clean and corruption-free, but it turns out that they're not. You can imagine the disappointment and the frustration. So I think this is very much wrapped up. Starts with a cost of living concern, and it unfolds into a bigger complaint about politics, the fact that politics are unaccountable and illegitimate in many places.
Thank you for coming on, Naomi Hossain, Global Research Professor from SOAS University in London. You're listening to World Business Report from the BBC World Service with me, Sam Fennick. Now to Denmark, which is the home of the giant pharma company Novo Nordisk, the firm behind the game-changing diabetes and weight loss drugs Ozempic and Wegovy. Last year, the drug maker made more than $12 billion in profits and is racing to boost its manufacturing capacity to keep up with soaring demand. Our reporter Adrian Murray travelled to the small town of Denmark, where it's based.
Stepping off the train in Kalundborg, a small port town with 17,000 residents, I'm greeted by a vast industrial site. The factory complex is made up of grey, boxy buildings, but there's also temporary cabins, towering cranes, and the beginnings of new concrete structures. An enormous expansion is underway. More than $8.5 billion is being spent right here. The local mayor of Kalundborg municipality, Martin Dam, takes me on a tour of Novo Nordisk's perimeter.
We are the center where the medicine starts.
About half of the world's insulin is produced at this site. It's also where semaglutide is made, a key ingredient for Wegovy and Ozempic.
Now you are coming into crane land.
The site is the size of 240 soccer pitches. Around 4,500 people are employed at the plant, and a further 1,200 roles will be added, he tells me.
We have a rule of thumb. When you have one job inside the industry, you will generate 3 jobs outside the industry.
Novo Nordisk's rising fortunes and growing corporate tax bill has also boosted local finances. Inside a hairdressing salon on the main shopping street, customer Gida Pedersen tells me she's optimistic about Kalundborg's future.
It's very good for the town. You see a lot of shops has been closed. Hopefully they will open again.
But she says many workers commute from elsewhere and the traffic is heavy.
It will take half an hour just to get out of town. Sometimes I have to wait because I have to be in the queue, and I don't like that.
Construction on the new highway to the capital begins in the new year, and more than 1,200 homes will also be built. In a small country of less than 6 million people, Novo Nordisk is now so big that it's having an outsized impact on the Danish economy, which grew 4 times faster than the European Union average. But strip away the drug giant, and it's a different story. Lasse Olsen is the chief economist at Danske Bank.
Last year, there was a 1.9% GDP growth in Denmark. Without the pharmaceutical industry, that would have been exactly 0.
The market for weight loss drugs is expected to be worth $100 billion annually by 2030. So the race to meet demand from this small town isn't about to let up anytime soon.
That was Adrienne Murray reporting for us. We're going to head to Brussels now, where Ursula von der Leyen will stay for another 5 years in the European Union's top job.
According to these results, the candidate for President of the European Commission, proposed by the European Council, is therefore elected by the European Parliament. I would like to congratulate Ursula von der Leyen on her re-election, and I wish her the very best for the exercise of her mandate.
That was the head of the Parliament, Roberta Metsola, announcing her re-election to the President of the European Commission. A European Christmas tree is how one lawmaker has described Ursula von der Leyen's lists of promises today. Simone Tagliapietra is a senior fellow at the Bruegel think tank in Brussels. He joins us now. And tell us, what does this Christmas tree look like? Adorned with gifts by the sounds of it.
Yes, indeed. Well, Ursula von der Leyen put forward a very multifaceted program in order to secure the majority she needs at the European Parliament to have a second mandate at the head of the European Commission. And this program is very much centered on the economic file, I would say. I think the major novelty there is the idea of putting forward a sustainable prosperity and competitiveness plan, which is basically the idea of undertaking the European Green Deal, this flagship initiative of the last 5 years, to put Europe on a journey to net zero by 2050 in a way that is compatible with industrialization, which is now the key priority for Europe. And on top of this, defense has become a very important item as well in the program.
And so for those of our listeners outside of Europe, tell us who she is and whether you think that she'll be able to deliver on those big promises.
Well, Ursula von der Leyen is a German politician, has been at the head of the European Commission, which is the executive body of the EU. And let's remember that the EU is the world's biggest single market with 500 million people. Ursula von der Leyen has been there for 5 years. Before, she was defense minister in Germany. And over the last 5 years, I think she has proved her capability to really adapt the policy-making machinery of Brussels, which is known to be complicated because we have 27 member states being part of the European Union, in a way to really respond to crisis. So she was very good in dealing with the pandemic, with the war in Ukraine, and I think we have a good chances for this program, or part of this program, to be duly implemented over the next 5 years.
And it was MEPs, so members of the European Parliament, who voted for her. But I understand that there wasn't much competition.
Yes, indeed. She was put forward by the EPP, the European People Party, which is the largest political family in Europe on the centre-right, of which she's a member of, and she was able to build the coalition that was required to get through. There was not much competition indeed. However, we need to say that the vote was uncertain until, I would say, at least last week, because we were unsure whether the Greens would support her. It turned out that the Green Party supported her, indeed, because she committed to stay on course the green agenda she has pitched over the last 5 years.
Simone, thank you very much for joining us. That's Simone Tagliapietra from the think tank in Brussels called Bruegel. And we're going to stay in Europe, because the European Central Bank has held interest rates at 3.75% in their latest meeting today. They did say that wages are higher and they will stay that way for a while, but they're still struggling to keep up with inflation. Well, Emma Wall can tell us the thinking behind all of this. She is Head of Investment Analysis and Research at Hargreaves Lansdown. Higher wages then seem to be playing into all aspects of the economy, like profits as well as productivity. Emma.
Yeah, what I think is really interesting about this decision is it's not unexpected. So the markets were expecting a halt from the ECB following that rate cut in June of 25 basis points, the first of the kind of major Western central banks to cut rates in this part of the cycle. Well, what's really interesting is what ECB President Christine Lagarde said in the press conference afterwards, and we're increasingly seeing this in the sort of high inflation, higher rates era, but it's less so about the headline interest rate decision, it's more about the voting behind it and then the press conference. And as you alluded to there, Lagarde was saying that wages are a problem, and also was pointing to sticky services inflation. And she alluded to the fact that she thinks actually inflation is going to stay above target rate into 2025, which has caused the euro to wobble a bit today, although markets are up.
And she hinted also in that press conference of a September rate cut, didn't she?
She did. She said that the meeting remains, quote, wide open. And I think September's quite an interesting one, because it's also when markets are pricing in the potential rate cuts from the Fed and indeed the Bank of England. An August rate cut is off the cards for Bank of England, according to markets currently, because of the inflation figure that came out this week, sort of stubbornly at 2%. The markets are expecting rate cuts from those three major central banks, but it's not the beginning of a successive